I still remember the exact moment my father's face went pale. He was sitting in a crowded restaurant, laughing, raising a glass, celebrating someone else. And then his phone buzzed. He looked down, and suddenly he stopped breathing, because on that screen, in front of millions of people across the country, was me. The same daughter he once called just a lowly teacher. The same daughter he refused to show up for just 48 hours earlier. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the night they chose to ignore me was the very night everything they believed about me was about to collapse. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been the one in your family who was never enough, no matter how hard you tried? No matter what you achieved, you were always the disappointment. Because I was. For 32 years, I was. And what happened next? It didn't just change my life. It exposed a truth my family spent decades refusing to see. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been overlooked, or made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love you, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because this story, it starts with rejection, it builds with silence, and it ends with something my family never saw coming. And honestly, even now, they still don't understand what they lost. Let me take you back to the moment it all began. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, I was the daughter no one in my family ever truly saw. Not really, not in the way that matters. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside of Boston, the kind of neighborhood where everything looked perfect from the outside. Trimmed lawns, matching mailboxes, family photos hanging in living rooms, smiling faces, holiday dinners, celebrations. We had all of that. At least, that's what it looked like. But inside our house, there was always a quiet hierarchy, one that no one ever said out loud, but everyone understood. My older brother Daniel, he was the pride of the family. Top of his class, full scholarship to Yale, now a corporate attorney making more money in a month than I made in a year. My parents talked about him like he was proof that they had done everything right. Every achievement of his celebrated, every milestone announced, every success magnified. And then there was me, the one who chose a different path, the one who became a teacher. I still remember the day I told my parents. I had just been accepted into a graduate program in education. I was excited, nervous, but proud. I thought maybe this would be the moment they'd finally see me. Teaching, my father said. Not angry, not even surprised, just disappointed, like I had confirmed something he already believed about me. That's what you're choosing to do with your life, I tried to explain. I told him I loved working with kids, that I wanted to make a difference, that it felt meaningful, but he didn't hear any of that. He just nodded slowly, like he was processing a mistake. My mother didn't say much. She rarely did when it came to me, but I remember the look on her face, that subtle, almost invisible shift, like she was already comparing me to Daniel and finding me lacking. Again, from that moment on, it became something they never said directly, but never stopped believing. Daniel had ambition. I had settled. Daniel had success. I had chosen less. And over time, those quiet judgments became louder, sharper, harder to ignore. At family dinners, conversations always circled back to Daniel. His cases, his clients, his promotions. My father would lean forward, eyes lit up with pride. You should hear what Daniel did this week. And I would sit there, smiling politely, waiting for the moment someone might ask about me. Sometimes they did, briefly. So, how's school going? Not which school, not what I was doing, just school. Like my entire career could be summarized in one vague word. It's good, I would say. And that was always enough for them. The conversation would move on. Back to Daniel. Back to what mattered. There was one Christmas, I think I was 29, when I told them about a project my students had worked on. We had raised money, organized a book drive, managed to fill an entire classroom library for kids who had nothing. I remember how proud I felt, how much it meant to those students. I shared it at dinner, carefully, hoping just this once it would matter. My father nodded, took a sip of his wine, and said, "That's nice." Then he turned to Daniel. "So tell us about the merger you mentioned." And just like that, my moment disappeared, like it had never existed. I stopped trying after that. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly. I learned to lower my expectations, to stop waiting for their approval, to stop hoping for something they had never really given me. Because hoping was exhausting, and disappointment became predictable. So I built a life outside of them. A small apartment, a classroom that felt more like home than my childhood house ever did. Students who looked at me like I mattered, like what I did made a difference. And maybe that should have been enough. Maybe it was, until the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The last bell had already rung. The hallways were quiet. I was erasing the whiteboard when I saw the envelope sitting on my desk. Thick, official, with a seal I didn't recognize at first. I picked it up slowly. My name was printed across the front, carefully, formally, and in the top corner, just beneath the return address, were the words that made my heart stop. United States Department of Education. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I'd like to admit, because something in me already knew. This wasn't small. This wasn't just another letter. This was something different, something important, something that might finally prove that everything I had chosen, everything I had endured, had meant something. I opened it with shaking hands, and as I read the first line, my entire world shifted, because buried inside that envelope was an invitation that most teachers never receive in their entire lifetime. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I made a mistake. I thought maybe this was finally something my family would care about. I didn't tell them right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to do it right. This wasn't just any news. This was the kind of moment you only get once in a lifetime. So I waited. 2 days. I carried that letter everywhere, in my bag, on my nightstand, folded carefully, like something fragile, like something that could break if I handled it the wrong way. I read it over and over again. Every word, every line. Finalists for the National Educator Excellence Award. 4 people, out of the entire country. 4. I tried to imagine what that meant. How many teachers there were in the U.S. Hundreds of thousands, maybe more. And somehow, my name was on that list. Someone had seen me, really seen me. Enough to put my name forward. Enough to believe I belonged there. That thought alone. It stayed with me, because it was something I had never really felt from my own family. By the 3rd night, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, the letter open beside me, and I started typing. I deleted the first message. Too long, too emotional. It sounded like I was begging. The second one felt too casual, like I was pretending it didn't matter. And it did. It mattered more than anything I had ever shared with them. By the 10th version, I finally got it right. Simple, clear, honest. Hi, everyone. I wanted to share something important. I've been selected as one of 4 finalists for a National Teaching Award. The ceremony is this Friday in Washington, D.C. It would really mean a lot to me if you could be there. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the send button. And suddenly, I felt like I was 12 years old again, waiting, hoping, bracing for something I couldn't control. What if they didn't care? What if they laughed? What if they said no? I took a breath and pressed send. Then I waited. I tried to distract myself. Made dinner, turned on the TV, graded a few assignments. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to my phone. Nothing. An hour passed. Then 2. By midnight, the message had been read. All 3 of them. And still, no response. I fell asleep with my phone beside me, screen facing up. Like maybe, if I stayed close enough, the answer would change. At 7:18 the next morning, my phone buzzed. I opened my eyes immediately, heart racing. There it was, a reply. From my father. I sat up slowly, opened the message, and read it once, then again, then a 3rd time, just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Sounds like one of those participation awards. I'm not flying across the country for that. Participation award. I stared at the words, trying to feel something. Anger, hurt, anything. But all I felt was familiar. Before I could process it, another message appeared. Daniel, hey, I've got a client dinner that night. Big opportunity. Can't reschedule. I let out a small breath. Of course he did. There was always something more important. Always something bigger, more valuable, more worthy of attention. I waited, just for a second. Maybe my mom would say something. Maybe she'd step in, balance it out, make it feel less final. Then her name appeared. I held my breath and watched as a small notification popped up. She had reacted to Daniel's message. A simple thumbs up. That was it. No words. No, we're proud of you. No, we'll figure something out. Just agreement. Silence disguised as support. My chest tightened. That old feeling crept back in. The one I thought I had learned to live with. I set my phone down, picked it up again, read the messages one more time, as if they might somehow change. But they didn't. They never did. I typed a response, short, controlled. Okay, I understand. 3 sentences. That was all I gave them, because anything more would have sounded like I still expected something. And I didn't. Not anymore. Or at least, that's what I told myself. A few seconds later, another message came through. Daniel again. You ever think about doing something different? Teaching isn't really a long-term move. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a door closing. I turned off my phone, set it face down on the table, and sat there in silence. Because the truth was, this wasn't surprising. Not really. It was just confirmation of something I had always known, something I had spent years trying to prove wrong. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would go to Washington, alone. I would sit in that room, walk onto that stage, and face whatever happened next without them. Because if they couldn't show up for me on the one night that mattered most, then maybe it was time I stopped waiting for them to. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this decision, this quiet moment of acceptance, was about to set something much bigger in motion, something none of us were ready for. And by the time they realized what they had missed, it would already be too late. 2 days before my flight, my mother called, which by itself was unusual. She didn't call often, not unless it had something to do with Daniel. Sarah, she said, her voice light, almost cheerful. We're having dinner on Thursday. Your father wants the whole family there. I hesitated. Thursday night, the night before my flight. I actually need to pack, I said carefully. It won't take long, she replied. Daniel has something exciting to share. Of course he did. There was always something, and somehow, it always took priority. I closed my eyes for a moment, then said, okay. When I arrived at my parents' house, everything looked exactly the same. Same polished floors, same framed photos, same sense that I was walking into a space that had never really been mine. Dinner was already set, candles lit, the good dishes out, the kind of effort reserved for occasions that mattered. Daniel was sitting at the head of the table, relaxed, confident, like he belonged exactly where he was. Sarah, he said with a quick smile, you made it. I nodded, took my seat. My father raised his glass before anyone had even touched their food. I'd like to make a toast, he said, to Daniel, for closing the biggest deal of his career. My mother beamed. Daniel gave a modest shrug. It was a team effort, he said, but his smile said otherwise. Go on, my father insisted. Tell her. Daniel leaned back slightly. Well, I just made partner. The room filled with excitement. My mother clapped her hands softly. My father shook his head in disbelief. Partner before 35, he said proudly. That's rare. I looked at Daniel. Congratulations, I said. And I meant it. I really did. Thanks, he replied. Then he looked at me. So, what about you, big week, right? There was something in his tone. Not curiosity, not support. Something else? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I leave tomorrow. For your event. my father asked. Event. Not award. Not ceremony. Just event. It's the national— Right, he interrupted, waving his hand slightly. The teaching thing. I felt my chest tighten. Daniel smirked faintly. So how does that work exactly? He asked. Do they give you a certificate or— My mother laughed softly. Daniel. But she didn't correct him, didn't defend me. I set my fork down. They present an award, I said calmly. In Washington. It's a national recognition. Daniel nodded slowly. Got it, he said. That's nice. Nice. That word again. My father leaned forward. Out of curiosity, he said, what does something like that lead to? I frowned slightly. What do you mean? Well, he continued, does it increase your salary? Open doors. Something tangible. I took a breath. It's not really about that, I said. It's about impact, recognition, the work itself. My father nodded, but not in agreement, in dismissal. I see, he said. Then he reached for his glass. Daniel glanced at me. You ever think about doing something bigger? He asked. Like transitioning into administration, or something more scalable. There it was. The word he didn't say. More important. I held his gaze. I like what I do, I said. That's not what I asked, he replied. Before I could respond, a voice spoke up quietly. I think it matters. We all turned. It was Emily, Daniel's wife. She had been silent up until that point, observing, listening. Now she looked directly at me. My third-grade teacher changed my life, she said. I still remember her name. The room went still. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. That's different, he said quickly. Emily didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on me. What you do stays with people, she said. For years, I felt something in my chest loosen. Just a little. A small, unexpected warmth. Thank you, I said softly. My father cleared his throat. Well, he said, forcing a smile. Let's not turn this into a philosophy discussion. Dinner continued, but something had shifted. Not in them, in me. Because for the first time that night, someone had seen me. Not as the lesser child, not as the disappointment, but as someone whose work actually mattered. And somehow, that made everything else they said a little quieter, a little less powerful. As the evening wound down, I stood to leave. Early flight, I said. My mother nodded. Safe travels. My father didn't stand. Enjoy your event, he said. I paused at the door, turned back. It's being broadcast, I said. They all looked at me. National coverage, I added. Live. For a brief second, no one spoke. Then Daniel gave a small shrug. Well, he said that's something. Something. I nodded, put on my coat, and walked out. But as I drove home that night, hands steady on the wheel, mind unusually quiet, one thought stayed with me. They still didn't understand. Not even a little. And for the first time, I stopped wishing they would. Because something told me, very soon, they wouldn't have a choice. The flight to Washington felt unreal. Not because of the distance, but because of what it represented. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't going somewhere to prove myself. I was going somewhere because someone else already believed I belonged there. The ticket had been arranged for me. First class. I almost laughed when I saw it. I had never flown first class before. Not once. As I settled into the wide seat, as the flight attendant greeted me by name, I felt something unfamiliar. Not pride. Not yet. Just recognition. Like for once, I wasn't being overlooked. The flight was quiet, smooth, too smooth for the storm that had been building inside me for years. When we landed, a car was waiting, a driver holding a sign with my name printed neatly across it. Ms. Mitchell. I nodded. He took my bag, opened the door, and just like that, I was being treated like someone important. The hotel was even more surreal. Marble floors, tall ceilings, staff who spoke to me with a kind of respect I wasn't used to receiving. Welcome, Ms. Mitchell. Your suite is ready. Suite, not room. Suite. I stood there for a moment, trying to take it in, because just 48 hours ago, my own family had dismissed this entire experience, like it was nothing. And now, here I was, surrounded by people who clearly thought otherwise. That night, I met the other finalists, 3 incredible educators, each with a story more powerful than the last. One had built a program for students with disabilities from the ground up. Another had helped immigrant children learn English while supporting entire families. The third had transformed a failing school into one of the highest performing in his district. Listening to them, I felt small, in the best possible way, like I was part of something bigger than myself, something meaningful. We sat together, sharing stories, laughing, admitting how strange it all felt. "Do you know who nominated you?" one of them asked. I shook my head. The letter said they wanted to stay anonymous. Same another said. We all exchanged glances, curious, a little nervous, because whoever had put our names forward had changed everything. Later that evening, they handed out programs for the ceremony. I flipped through mine slowly. Names, titles, organizations. And then I saw it, a name that made my breath catch. Guest of honor, Margaret Reynolds. I stared at it. Read it again. Margaret Reynolds, my grandmother. I sat there, frozen, because suddenly everything started to make sense. Her phone call, her calm confidence, the way she had said she would be there, no matter what. My grandmother had been a principal for over 3 decades. She had turned struggling schools into models of excellence. People respected her, listened to her, but I had never fully understood just how much. Until that moment. The next morning, I found her in the hotel lobby, sitting by the window, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. She looked up as I approached and smiled, that same warm, steady smile she had always given me. "Sarah," she said softly. I walked toward her slowly, heart pounding. "Grandma," I held up the program. "Why is your name on this?" She gestured to the chair beside her. "Sit." I did. She took my hands in hers. And for a moment, she just looked at me, like she was seeing something she had known all along. "I've been watching you for years," she said. "Every student you helped, every late night, every small thing you thought no one noticed." My throat tightened. "You knew I asked." She nodded. "I knew." I swallowed hard. "You nominated me." A soft smile. "Yes." The word barely left her lips, but it carried the weight of everything. "I don't nominate people lightly," she continued. "In my entire career, I've only ever recommended a handful." I stared at her. "How many?" She paused. "Enough to know when someone is ready." "Ready." The word echoed in my chest. But why now, I asked. "Why not before?" Her expression softened. "Because now, you don't need anyone's approval to do what you do." She squeezed my hands gently. "That's when it matters most." I felt tears building. Uninvited. Unstoppable. "All these years," I whispered. "I thought no one saw me." She shook her head. "I saw you." Her voice was steady, certain, and not just me. She leaned closer. "Tonight, the whole country will." I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. "Grandma." "There's more," she said. I looked up. "There will be a speaker for each finalist." My heart skipped. "A former student," she continued. "Someone whose life you changed." My mind raced. "Who?" She smiled. "You'll see." That smile, it held something. Something bigger than I understood in that moment. "And Sarah," she added quietly, "don't worry about your parents." I looked at her. "They'll see it," she said. "Everyone will." Her words lingered with me, long after she stood up, long after she walked away. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about an award. This wasn't just about recognition. This was something else. Something that had been building for years. And that night, whether my family was ready or not, the truth about who I was about to be revealed to everyone. The ballroom was already full when I stepped behind the curtain. Soft lights, low conversations, the quiet hum of anticipation. I could feel it in the air. Something important was about to happen. A production assistant adjusted the microphone on my dress. "You'll go out when your name is called," she said gently. I nodded, but my hands, they wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, from everything this moment carried. Years of being overlooked, years of being dismissed, all of it, leading here. I took a slow breath, peeked through the curtain, and froze. Rows of tables filled the room. Hundreds of people, educators, officials, leaders, people who actually understood what this night meant. And right in the front row, I saw her, my grandmother, sitting tall, proud, her eyes already glistening. She caught my gaze and smiled, that same quiet, steady belief she had always given me. And somehow, that was enough to steady my heartbeat. The lights dimmed. The room fell silent. The Secretary of Education stepped onto the stage. Tonight, he began, "We honor those who change lives, not with headlines, but with heart." His voice carried through the room. Calm, measured, powerful. Teachers who see potential where others see limitations. I closed my eyes for just a second, because those words, they felt personal, deeply personal. And before we announce this year's recipient, he continued, "We want to share the impact these educators have had beyond the classroom." My breath caught. This was it. Each finalist will hear from someone whose life they've changed. My heart started racing. Faster now, uncontrollable. "Please welcome." He paused, just long enough. "Michael Carter." The name hit me like a wave. Michael. My mind rushed backward. A boy, sitting in the last row. Always quiet, always withdrawn. Wearing the same jacket every single day. He used to avoid eye contact, barely spoke, barely existed in the eyes of others. But not to me, never to me. And now, the man walking onto that stage was someone else entirely. Tall, confident, dressed in a clean, sharp suit. A badge clipped to his jacket. Stanford Medical Center. My breath caught in my throat. He stepped up to the microphone, looked out at the audience. Then, he looked at me and smiled. "When I was 15, he began. I didn't think I'd live past 20. The room went completely still. I was homeless," he continued. "My mom was gone. My dad, never around." His voice didn't shake, but something in it carried years of pain. I stopped caring about school, about anything. He paused, took a breath. Then I walked into Ms. Mitchell's classroom. My chest tightened. She didn't treat me like a problem. He looked directly at me now. She treated me like I mattered. My eyes filled instantly. I couldn't stop it. She noticed things he said. That I was hungry, that I was tired, that I needed help, even when I didn't ask for it. The room was silent, listening, hanging on every word. "She stayed after school with me," he continued, "helped me apply for scholarships, made sure I had somewhere safe to go." He swallowed, just slightly. "And when I got into college," his voice softened, "she was the first person I called." I covered my mouth, trying to hold it together, but it was impossible now. "Today," he said, "I'm a surgical resident." A ripple moved through the audience. Soft gasps, quiet awe. "And I wouldn't be here." He paused, without her. The applause started slowly, then grew and grew until the entire room was on its feet, clapping. For him, for me, for something bigger than both of us. I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could feel was the weight of that moment. Everything I had ever done, every late night, every small act that felt invisible, none of it had been invisible. Not to him, not to the people who mattered. And in that moment, I realized something. I had spent years waiting for my family to see my worth, when all along, it had already been seen, recognized, proven in ways that mattered far more. The applause slowly faded. The secretary returned to the stage, holding an envelope. "The finalists you've seen tonight," he said, "represent the very best of our nation." My heart started racing again. Different now, sharp, focused, but only one. He opened the envelope. Time slowed. The room held its breath. And somewhere, miles away, in a restaurant filled with laughter, my family had no idea that in the next few seconds, everything they believed about me was about to shatter. The 2024 National Educator Excellence Award. He looked up, smiled. "It goes to Sarah Mitchell, 300 miles away." In a softly lit restaurant, my family was celebrating. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. The kind of evening that felt important, at least to them. Daniel leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident, satisfied, To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. My father smiled, pride written all over his face. This, he said, gesturing around the table, this is what success looks like. My mother nodded. This is what hard work leads to. And for a moment, everything felt exactly the way they believed it should be. Predictable, comfortable, certain. Then, my father's phone buzzed. A small sound, easy to ignore. But he didn't. He glanced down, casually at first. Just another notification. Another headline. Another piece of information in a world that usually revolved around him. But then, his expression changed. Subtly, his smile faded. His eyes narrowed. He leaned closer to the screen, and the room began to quiet. What is it? My mother asked. He didn't answer, didn't move, just stared, frozen. Richard, she pressed. Slowly, he turned the phone toward her. His hand, slightly trembling, she took it, looked down, and within seconds, her face lost all color. That's, she whispered. That's Sarah. Daniel frowned. Let me see. He reached for the phone. And the moment his eyes landed on the screen, everything shifted, because there I was, standing under bright lights, holding a Crystal Award, shaking hands with the Secretary of Education. Behind me, a banner stretched across the stage. National broadcast. Live. This can't be real, Daniel said. But it was, and there was no denying it. Another notification appeared. Then another. Phones around the table started buzzing, one after another, like a chain reaction they couldn't stop. My father's screen lit up again. A call. He ignored it. Then another, and another. Messages followed. Friends, colleagues, people they hadn't heard from in years. Just saw your daughter on TV. Why aren't you there? You must be so proud. Each message, a quiet accusation. Each one, a reminder of where they weren't. Daniel scrolled quickly. More headlines. More images. More proof. This is national coverage, he said slowly. His voice no longer confident. No longer certain. This is a big deal. A big deal. The same thing they had dismissed. Less than 2 days ago, my mother looked around the restaurant, as if suddenly aware that they were no longer invisible. That someone, anyone, might recognize what was happening. And then, someone did. A woman from a nearby table approached. Excuse me, she said gently. I don't mean to interrupt, but she hesitated, her eyes flicking to the phone still in my mother's hand. Is that your daughter? Silence. My father forced a smile. Yes, he said. That's our daughter. The woman's face lit up. She's incredible, she said. I just saw her speech. Then she paused, looked around the table, a small crease forming between her brows. Why aren't you with her? The question hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. No one answered. No one could, because there was no explanation that didn't expose the truth. We had plans, my mother said finally, her voice uncertain, unconvincing. The woman tilted her head slightly. It's only a few hours away, she said. You could have driven. That was it. No accusation, no judgment in her tone. Just simple logic. And somehow, that made it worse. Oh, she added softly, I see. And in those 2 words, everything was said. She stepped away, back to her table. But the silence she left behind was louder than anything else in the room. Daniel set the phone down slowly, his jaw tight. This is bad, he muttered. Really bad. My father rubbed his forehead, trying to process, trying to regain control of something that was already out of his hands. My mother stared at the table, at the untouched food, at the celebration that suddenly felt meaningless. Because in that moment, everything they had valued, everything they had prioritized, was being quietly questioned. Not by me, not by confrontation, but by reality itself. And it was happening in front of everyone, without warning, without mercy. Daniel's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then froze. What my father asked? Daniel hesitated, then turned the screen. A social media post, a clip from the broadcast. My voice, my words, and beneath it, comments. Hundreds of them. Praising, admiring, asking the same question over and over again. Where is her family? Daniel swallowed. Hard. They're asking about us, he said. And just like that, the spotlight shifted from me to them. And there was nowhere left to hide. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It spread, quietly at first, then all at once, like something breaking beneath the surface, before anyone realized how deep the cracks had gone. That same night, while I was still standing on that stage, while the applause was still echoing in my ears, Daniel was already trying to contain the damage. He excused himself from the table, stepped outside, phone in hand, mind racing, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control of the narrative. And that terrified him. Within minutes, he posted a picture of me, smiling, holding the award. "So proud of my sister tonight," he wrote. "Always believed in her. Family comes first." It was clean, polished, convincing, the kind of statement people expected, the kind that protected an image. And for a brief moment, it worked. Likes, comments, congratulations, support. Everything looked normal until it didn't, because buried in those comments was a name, someone who had been at lunch with him earlier that day, someone who had heard exactly what he said about me. Funny, the comment read, "This morning you called her a ward. Just a participation thing." What changed? Silence. Then another reply. "Wait, is that true?" More comments followed. Faster now. Curiosity turning into suspicion. Suspicion turning into judgment. Daniel stared at the screen, frozen, because this time he couldn't spin it. He couldn't redirect it. He couldn't control it. Screenshots appeared. Messages were shared. People began connecting the dots. And suddenly, the story wasn't about me anymore. It was about him. About what he said, when no one thought it mattered. Back inside the restaurant, my parents were still sitting in silence, watching it unfold, watching something they didn't understand slip further out of their grasp. "What's happening?" my mother asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just walked back to the table, set his phone down, and said quietly, "It's everywhere." My father frowned. "What is?" Daniel looked at him, really looked this time. "They know we didn't go." The words landed heavy. Final. Unavoidable. My father's expression hardened. "That's none of their business." But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction, because deep down, he knew it wasn't about business. It was about perception, reputation. And right now, both were slipping. The next morning, it got worse. Much worse. Because what had started as comments became conversations, then headlines, small at first, local blogs, education forums. Then larger platforms picked it up. Award-winning teacher's family, absent at ceremony. Viral story raises questions about support behind success. Questions. That's all it took, because questions invite attention, and attention brings consequences. Daniel's firm noticed. Of course they did. Clients noticed too, especially the ones tied to education initiatives. And suddenly, his name was attached to something uncomfortable, something that didn't align with the image he had built so carefully. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't loud, but it was there. Subtle shifts, conversations behind closed doors, opportunities, quietly redirected. And for the first time, Daniel felt what it was like to be judged, not for what he achieved, but for who he appeared to be. Back in Washington, my phone had been buzzing for hours. Calls, messages, voicemails, all from them, my father, my mother, Daniel, again and again. But I didn't answer. Not one. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge, but because, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to respond. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to prove. They had seen it. The whole world had seen it. And whatever they felt now, that was theirs to carry, not mine. I sat in my hotel room that night, the award resting quietly beside me, the city lights glowing outside the window. And for the first time in years, my mind was still. No replaying conversations, no wondering what I could have done differently, no hoping they would understand, because something had changed. Not in them, in me. I had spent so long waiting for them to recognize my worth, to validate it, to confirm that I mattered. And now, I didn't need that anymore. Because the truth was, I already knew. And that kind of clarity, it doesn't come from applause, or awards, or even recognition. It comes from finally understanding that your value was never theirs to define. And as my phone buzzed again, lighting up the dark room, I simply turned it over, let it ring, and chose peace. If you step back from this story and look at it through a wider lens, what happened here isn't just about one family. It's about something much deeper, something many people carry quietly for years. As someone who has spent decades studying human relationships, family dynamics, and emotional resilience, I can tell you this: the deepest wounds rarely come from strangers. They come from the people we hoped would see us and didn't. Sarah's story isn't powerful because she proved her family wrong. It's powerful because she stopped needing them to be right. That shift, that quiet decision to stop chasing validation, is one of the hardest things a person can do, and also one of the most freeing. Because here's the truth: your worth is not determined by who applauds you, or who ignores you, or who fails to understand you. Your worth is revealed in the lives you touch, in the quiet impact you make when no one is watching. And sometimes, the people who should have seen that first are the last ones to recognize it, or they never do. And that has to be okay, because healing doesn't come from finally being seen by them. It comes from finally seeing yourself clearly, fully, without apology. Sarah didn't get revenge. She got something far more powerful: clarity, peace, and the strength to choose her own boundaries. And maybe that's the real ending we should all hope for. Not winning in front of others, but no longer needing to. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by the people closest to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, they're not just about drama. They're about understanding, growth, and sometimes finally finding the words for feelings we've carried for years. And if you're still here, I'd love to ask you one question. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting for someone else to see your worth? Think about that, because the answer might change everything.